So I've got a wonderful topic tonight. This is actually an article that I read. I think it was originally posted by, not originally posted, but I saw it because Sifu Donahue in Michigan posted it, and it kind of brought this topic to mind, and I want to expand on it. But it's this, the phrase that really got me was fruitful monotony. And I love the phrase fruitful monotony. I really like monotony in general. I've actually had, you guys can probably tell this, but it's much less pronounced in the dojo than it is outside the dojo, but I usually have actually a really monotonous voice. And so I like to think of myself in nature as being like very just even and monotone, and sometimes people will make fun of me, but when in the dojo, I'm just yelling the whole time, so you guys can't tell. But people have a very different relationship with monotony. They think monotony is boredom. They think, I hate the idea of being like this. I want excitement. I want things to always be happening. And I get that. That's human nature. But it is also a product of our age. And I don't mean like how old you are. I mean the times that we live in. And it's also just a human function. But if you think about it, way back in the day, pretty much nothing was happening at all. I mean, except you would just wake up and go hunt and find your food and then go home and eat it and then sleep. And you wake up the next day and you do it again. And then stuff got really exciting when you started your farm, and then you plant something and you stick it in the ground, and then you just walk away and come back in a month, and then you get your food. And when we started like moving into cities and stuff got really busy, and then we have all these different jobs and like it's very noisy and there's constantly stuff happening, we get used to it. And then society tells us you always have to get more and more, and it's like things are only good if you are constantly working on getting the next best thing, which is going back to last week's talk about the never-ending cycle of desire. But we have this curious thing happening where we kind of crave being bombarded with sensory input all the time, and I know a lot of you are going to leave meditation, get in your car, turn on the radio, and just be like jamming out as you're driving home. Or you'll get home and you turn on the TV and find out, what Trump tweeted today or whatever. And it's we crave this. Yet while we're bombarding ourselves with that, we also crave some silence, and we crave this peace. And that's what I think of fruitful monotony as. It's this peace that we can choose, and it's not just like nothing is happening. It is really just being able to be with that boredom and be with that peace and quiet, and get the most out of it. The real issue comes when not like, okay, I get, you guys understand because I'm preaching to all the people who are in here for meditation, and you all get the value of sitting and being quiet and meditating. But what if you zoom out and you see the monotony over the long term? And I mean like maybe it's days or weeks or months where nothing seems to change, and you're just like kind of going. And that is like this idea where we have peaks and valleys, and this is exciting, and I'm on top of the world and I feel amazing, or I'm down here and I feel awful, but at least something's happening and it's, exciting and it's entertaining. But then we've got this in the middle, and this is the plateau. And the plateau is in a lot of ways worse, because you've been through this and you know that this is going to end, and you know that this is going to end, but when it's like this, it just can seem to last forever. And that is where we want to just be able to kind of sink into it. And the variability to just like love the plateau and love the monotony and get the most out of it is so useful in practice for sure. If we take meditation, what you're seeking when you sit and meditate is that peace and calm, and then to get deeper and deeper into it. But if you look at it in another sense, like, what if I feel like this is me improving in meditation, I'm getting better and better, but then I just hit that plateau, and then I feel like, I'm not getting any better. It's not like I'm getting worse, but it's just I'm staying the same. And I'll be honest, I've had several periods of time like that in my practice. In fact, I just came out of one that's, to my recollection, lasted like about a decade. I've been meditating for 17 years, coming on 18 years now. And there have definitely been times where I can tell I'm getting better, and there have definitely been times where I feel like I'm getting worse, even though it's not necessarily the case. But then there are times where it's just like, this is it. And the first thing that there is to do is not fight it. And this has never actually been my problem. This is one thing that I am probably the best at in the world. I am so good at just being exactly okay with things exactly the way that they are. And I'm not saying that as a compliment, but it is useful because I didn't quit meditating. I've not missed a day. And I've had those things in practice, in martial arts, and I've had it in other places too. And like earlier on in my life, I definitely would have quit. But now I've gotten to the point where I've reconciled with the monotony. I have come to terms with the knowledge that the plateau is a fact of life and it's going to happen. And that's actually the first step to getting beyond it. Yet you can't say like, yeah, I'm gonna really be okay with the plateau, and like if it doesn't go away in a day, I'm gonna be pissed off. You have to really embrace it and be totally great with it. And that's what I mean by embracing the grind. So the grind is just showing up and doing it, and not expecting to get anything out of it, not even expecting to get better. And this is a question that I asked in class a couple days ago, but Sifu Brown first asked it years and years ago, pretty early in my practice, maybe like yellow sash or second yellow. And he asked us in advanced class, if you knew that you were never going to get better at martial arts, would you really keep practicing? Would you actually continue showing up and doing the work if you know you're not going to get any better? And of course, I knew, because I was very smart back then at like 19 years old, that the PC answer is yes, of course I'll keep practicing for the rest of my life. And I think that if I were really being honest with myself, and if most of us are honest with ourselves, the answer is no. If I know I'm not going to get any better, why would I keep practicing? What's the point? And that's really what we want to look at tonight. So Sifu Brown went to practice at the Hombu Dojo in Japan, which is where Aikido is founded. And I've gone and practiced there myself too. And it's a wonderful school filled with a ton of amazing students. And it's got, I would guess, in a single school, it's got to be probably the most students who've been practicing for over a decade or two out of any school in the world. It is just packed with people who've been there for forever. And many of them are quite old, slowing down physically, not getting stronger, not getting faster. And for sure, a lot of them, their technique, they're refining it and they can see some improvement. But I promise you, a lot of them are not really seeing improvement. And there is nobody there that's just thinking like, well, I've been doing it for 20 years, I'm not getting any better, I'm just going to quit. That just flies in the face of the nature of practice, if you really understand it on a deep level. And I love Sifu Brown telling us about this student who he saw, who while he was there practicing, over the period of time that he was there, he would see this old man come, and he'd been there for a while. It was very obvious. He wasn't the best student in class. He was not ignored, but he wasn't like, one of the senior students that's brought up in front of the class and demonstrated on. He would just kind of be there in his corner and just, work on technique and be a great partner with great etiquette, and in the end of class, do his job to clean the dojo, go home, come back the next day, do it all again. And there's no glory, outward glory for this man. He doesn't show up because somebody's going to look at him today and say, "You are amazing." He doesn't come because he thinks that he's going to get the next rank. He doesn't come for any of that. He shows up to class just to practice for the sake of being there and practicing. And he took a picture of this man as he was cleaning up the dojo, and he put it up in the dojo in a really prominent place. And every time I see it, I think that's what I want to be. I want to be that man who just shows up and practices and does not care about the glory and doesn't care even about getting better. It's just practice for the sake of practice. And I was just thinking about this idea, and I wrote it down here. We think about, we get into this trap of wanting to do the things that we feel like doing. And it's like, I'm not going to do this thing unless I'm motivated to do it. And we even say in the 7.5 ways of becoming great at martial arts, you have to love it. And while I definitely agree it's true, if you don't love it, you're going to have a really hard time coming back to class day in and day out for years. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't love it, because you should. And if you don't at least like martial arts, I don't know why you're still here. But that's not why we practice. Now that is maybe a reason, and I certainly love martial arts and that helps me to continue to come, but that's not it. And we don't practice because we're getting better. You can't guarantee that. We don't practice because we can't imagine life without it. If you have a halfway decent imagination, you can spend 5 seconds and think about what your life would be without practicing martial arts. But you can continue to practice because you have thought about it and you imagine what life would be like, and you know that it's not going to be as good for whatever reason it is that keeps you coming back, or for all of these reasons. I was talking with somebody earlier today, a senior student who's been with me for 3 years or so, and he has a hard time making it to class sometimes. There's a lot going on in his life. His schedule is really difficult, and yet he keeps coming. And he said to me, this is what I do. I come to the dojo and I practice because if I don't, it's bad and I get depressed. And that is, while I don't wish that any of you guys get depressed if you don't come to the dojo, it might happen, so keep coming to the dojo. If you do something that adds so much to your life, and then you lose it, and this is going to happen to most of you at some point, maybe even all of you. At some point, something in life is going to take you away from the dojo, and you're not going to be able to come. You got to move to some godforsaken state, or something happens and you have to leave and go take care of somebody or whatever, and it's like you're not here anymore. You will miss it, I promise you. But you don't even have to wait that long to experience this. If you get lazy and you stop meditating or you stop practicing for like a week, you will notice it. If you have actually been practicing in earnest, it is going to take this long for you to start to recognize how much you really depend on and get out of your practice. And so you can think about that. But at the end of the day, that is still kind of coming back to, I'm not trying to guilt you guys into practice or like try to trick you into it. I'm trying to say that the motivation to practice, it can always be there. If you stop, you'll find it. You'll recognize, I got to get back in the dojo. That's not what this is about. This is about being able to decide, I'm going to do something, and then regardless of the motivation, just continue to do it. And that's really the main reason why I practice, and that's the main reason why I meditate every day, and that's the main reason why I do the things that I do, is because I've worked really hard for a long time to be able to divorce what I feel like doing from what I do. And I definitely seek out motivation regularly, and I read things that are really motivational, and I get it from you guys, and in general I love teaching, and yet there are still days where I don't feel like showing up, like one day a year. But I show up anyways because it is what I do. And there are definitely times where I have not meditated for the full hour that day, and it's time for bed, and I remember, okay, this is it. I got to finish my meditation. And there are definitely times where I don't feel like continuing to meditate. I just can think to myself, oh, what if I just do it tomorrow? And then as soon as I have that thought, I just let it go, because I know that if I allow myself to be a slave to my motivation and what I feel like doing, then it's all going to go out the window, because you are not going to feel like doing the stuff that needs to get done as often as you need to do it. And what I love to do is I hear that voice in my head, and it's saying like, do you really have to do this now? And I exaggerate it, and I make it sound like I don't feel like it. And it's like a little kid like kicking the ground. I don't want to do it right now. And that is the part of you that's saying that. And if you can set that part of you in the back seat of the car and say, that's okay, you can be back there and bitch and moan all you want, I'm driving, and we're doing this. This is like my higher self is in charge right now. Then that's great. That is very, very useful. And this is what you get out of fruitful monotony. That is the fruit of the monotony. And it's not too difficult to understand. I actually asked the kids about this earlier today. I said, this was to the older kids, because the little kids, they can hardly talk. But the older kids, I said, what do you think would be better? If you were already great at martial arts, or if you had to try hard to get great at martial arts? And every single kid in class said, if you had to try hard, sir. And I did not expect that, honestly. But I asked them about it. And I asked one kid, and they gave me kind of like an okay answer. And I asked the next kid, and he nailed it. He said, well, if you have to try really hard to get great at martial arts, then that's going to make you better at trying hard. And if you got great without having to really try, then that's not really something to be proud of. And I said, absolutely. That's like saying, being great at something without having to try at it and being proud at it is like saying, well, I'm really proud I was born with 4 arms or 2 forearms. I didn't say that. I said it's like being really proud of being born with 2 arms and 2 legs. It's like that has nothing to do with you. You don't need to be proud of that. And some people come into the dojo, and I see them like they are super talented. They just have a natural gift for it. And people who have never practiced martial arts sometimes pick stuff up like this. And then there are other people who are not like that. That would be most of you. And even me. Like, was it easier for me than a lot of people? Yeah. But it was not easier for me than another lot of other people. I mean, I've seen people come into this dojo who, honestly, I have some students who are already better at some parts of practice than I am. And I could see that and say, what's wrong with me? Or I could see that and say, well, that's not fair. I've put in so much more work and so much more effort and time. Or I could see that and say, that's right, I'm a good teacher. But I don't do any of that. I do the last one. But I look at it and I say, great, that's something for me to strive for. Or I say, great, this, good for this student. But honestly, I think back to this, it's an old Buddhist parable. And I don't even know if it's a parable, but it's a thing, it's a saying. The best horse, some of you guys have heard this, the best horse runs at the shadow of the whip. The next best horse will run just as fast, but right before the whip hits it. The next best horse will run, but not until it feels the sting of the whip on its skin. And the last crappiest horse will run when it feels the pain of the whip down to the marrow of its bones. And while that sounds really rough, and I'm not saying that you should be like really stubborn and just like, I'm not going to do what Sifu says until he whips me, but you actually don't want to be the best horse because it's too easy. And like, what kind of progress on like a deep soul level is that horse making if it's just easy for them? They're not making progress. They're not getting anything out of it, really. Just being good at what you do, there's no process there. And like my favorite Tai Chi students are the ones who struggle at learning just the first couple of postures just to get the sequence of it. And it's like the coordination, they're lost. And quite unfortunately, those are the people who usually quit within the first couple of months. They just feel like they're not getting it. But if I do a good enough job of explaining this to them, they'll get it. Like, that is the best place to be because you will get the most out of your practice. You have the most progress to make, but you have the most to get out of it in a much deeper level, beyond just like, how much do I have to improve? It's nice to think like, I'm so bad and I've got so much room to improve, but I mean like on that deep level of your humanity and of what is even beyond your humanity. What do you have to gain? What kind of progress can you get? Are you gonna be evolving in your practice? And to have somebody just hand it to you, there's nothing there. There's something else that I want to say and I'm forgetting it. Oh yeah, I got one more. I should have said this before, but whatever. So this is just another great example, and it's a wonderful visual. I love this. And it just speaks to this idea of basically just doing the work regardless of the results and how that plays out. So there was an old master who had no heirs, and he was deciding which of his students he was going to pass down the dojo to, who was going to take over teaching. And he took his 3 best students and invited them to his home. And in the backyard, they saw a huge well filled with water, and they saw 3 barrels, and they were each given a bucket. And he said, whoever fills their barrel up with water first is going to become my heir. And so they all grabbed their buckets and they dumped it in the well, and they ran over to the barrel and they dumped it in, and they saw there's no bottom in the barrel. It just sloshed out onto the ground. And they just looked at each other like, all right. They just kept going back to the well, get a bucket, dump it in the barrel, spills out of the bottom. They did that all day. They did that all night. The master showed back up the next day, and they were just like crawling over to the barrel, dumping the water in, and nothing. And then he said, all right. I'll give you one more chance. Come back the next day. So they showed up the next day, and they immediately walked over to the barrels. They checked the barrels, and they see there's a bottom in the barrel. Okay. So he gave them their bucket, and they see that there's no bottom in the bucket. And 2 of the students just dropped the bucket and said, screw it. And they left. The 3rd student saw an opportunity. He walked over to the well, took his bucket of water, walked it over and got like 2 drips and put it in the barrel. Walked back over to the well, got 2 more drips, put it in the barrel, and just did this all night. The way I'm envisioning it, probably took longer than that, but he eventually filled up his barrel and he inherited the school. And it is, a nice visual and a great way to think of it. And it's not just about, keep trying and you'll get it someday. Because the truth is, you may never fill your barrel. You may always just have like this this fruitless monotony, this work that just goes. But it is also highly likely that if you can just fall in love with the work and do it and continue through that and embrace the grind, that you will eventually, one drop at a time, fill your barrel all the way up, whatever that is for you in your practice or in your life. So we're going to do that today. When you meditate, you often recognize, like, I didn't just get enlightened when I finished this meditation, but you might be getting one drip closer, so you may as well do it anyways. Sit comfortably.